I've been a lurker here for years, reading stories of love, loss, and everything in between. I never thought I'd be writing one of my own, but some stories I think need to be told, not for sympathy or for validation, but just to be put out into the universe, to give weight to a feeling that has shaped the very core of who I am. Have you ever loved someone with such an all-consuming intensity that their happiness eclipses your own? Not in a codependent, unhealthy way. I'm talking about a love so pure, so profound, that you would willingly shatter your own heart into a million pieces just to ensure theirs remains whole and vibrant. That's my story. It's the story of Ethan, my first love, my everything. And it's the story of the day I stood in the shadows and watched him marry the love of his life. Who wasn't me? I was there. Of course I was there. I couldn't not be. I told myself it was for closure, a final masochistic pilgrimage to the tomb of what we once had. I wore a simple sundress, something that wouldn't draw attention, and found my spot behind an ancient oak tree at the edge of the clearing. A ghost at the feast. A silent, uninvited guest at the happiest day of his life. My heart wasn't just breaking. It was methodically, rhythmically pulverizing itself inside my chest. Each beat was a dull, echoing thud, a reminder of the cavernous space he used to occupy. I watched him as he took Chloe's hands in his. I knew that touch. I knew the way his thumb would gently stroke her knuckles, a small, reassuring gesture that always made me feel like the safest person on earth. He was smiling at her, and it was that smile. The one I had cataloged in my memory 1,000 times over. The one that started in his eyes, a brilliant, starburst crinkle before it even reached his lips. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated adoration, and it was aimed entirely at her. Every instinct, every primal urge in my body was screaming at me. Run, run to him. Tell him this is all a terrible mistake. Remind him of the promises we made under a blanket of stars when we were 17, promises of forever that felt as real and solid as the ground beneath our feet. My feet felt rooted to the spot, encased in the cement of a decision I'd made a lifetime ago. Because in that moment, as I watched him mouth the words, "I do," a wave of excruciating clarity washed over me. It was so sharp, so brutally honest, it stole the air from my lungs. This perfect, beautiful, heart-wrenching scene was my masterpiece. It was the final, undeniable proof that I had done the right thing. My greatest act of love wasn't the thousands of little things I did for him when we were together. It was the one monumental thing I did for him when I walked away. Letting him go, it wasn't the tragic end of our love story. It was the very definition of it. His happiness was a physical thing, a radiant aura that I could feel even from 100 yards away. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I could never have given him that. Not in the same way. Our love was a beautiful, passionate, all-consuming thing, but it had a price, and that price was his dreams. Seeing him there, untethered, soaring. It was a dagger to my heart and a soothing balm to my soul, all at once. It's a strange thing to find peace in your own heartbreak, to see the person you love more than life itself find there forever, and to know that you were the one who had to close the door to make it happen. But to really understand why I was standing there, a willing martyr at the altar of his happiness, to understand the weight of that moment, we have to go back. We have to rewind the tape to the very beginning, to a time before the heartbreak, before the sacrifice, before the impossible choices, to a time when it was just Mia and Ethan, and we were infinite. The summer I turned 16 was, for the most part, excruciatingly unremarkable. It was a blur of sweltering humidity, the smell of chlorine from the public pool, and the kind of deep, existential boredom only a teenager can truly appreciate. I was painfully shy, more comfortable in the fictional worlds of the books I devoured than in my own skin. So, naturally, my mother had volunteered me to run the book swap stall at the annual town fair. It was her well-intentioned attempt to get me out of my shell. Mostly, I just felt like a turtle who'd been forcibly evicted. I was attempting to bring some semblance of order to the chaos, creating precarious, leaning towers of dog-eared paperbacks, when a shadow fell over my table. A voice asked, "Are you building a literary fortress to protect yourself from the riffraff?" And there he was, Ethan. He wasn't the captain of the football team or the guy every girl swooned over. He was different. He had this quiet confidence, an aura of someone who was completely comfortable in his own universe. And when he looked at you, it felt like he was actually seeing you, not just looking at you. A rare commodity in the hormone-fueled jungle of high school. I pushed my glasses up my nose, a nervous habit, and mumbled something about trying to alphabetize. He leaned against the table, his movements easy and relaxed. "A noble, if futile, endeavor," he said with a charming, crooked smile. "I respect the effort." He held up a battered copy of On the Road. "Got any Kerouac in those towers of yours? Or is it all just teen romance novels with shirtless guys on the cover?" A real smile touched my lips. "We have a very sophisticated and varied collection, thank you very much," I retorted, pointing. "I think I saw a copy of The Dharma Bums over there, if you're brave enough to risk a paperback avalanche to get it." And just like that, the awkwardness melted away. We spent the next 3 hours talking, not just about books, though we covered everything from Salinger to Austen. We talked about music, about our mutual hatred for calculus, about our families, about the suffocating smallness of our town, and our big, sprawling dreams of escaping it. He told me he wanted to be an architect, to design buildings that were like sculptures you could live in. He wanted to see the world, to walk the ancient streets of Rome and Paris. I told him I wanted to be a writer, to create stories that would make people feel something, to capture the quiet truths of ordinary lives. It wasn't love at first sight. That feels too flimsy, too superficial for what it was. It was recognition at first sight. It was looking at a stranger and feeling, in the deepest part of your soul, that you had known them forever. It was the universe telling me, "Oh, there you are. I've been waiting for you." That day, I didn't just meet a boy. I met the other half of my own soul. Our friendship was the soil from which our love grew. It was rich and deep and solid. For the first year, that's all it was. We were inseparable. We were Mia and Ethan, a single entity in the social landscape of our high school. We were partners in crime during history class, study buddies for every exam, and each other's permanent +1 for every boring family function. He was the only person I could talk to for hours about nothing at all, and the only person I could sit with in comfortable silence. I think the moment I knew our friendship was something deeper happened the winter my grandmother passed away. I was devastated, hollowed out by a grief that was too big for my 17-year-old frame. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to see anyone. I just wanted to disappear. But Ethan didn't call or text with empty platitudes. He just showed up. He sat with me in my room for hours, in complete silence, while I cried. He didn't offer advice or try to cheer me up. He just offered his presence, a quiet, solid anchor in the storm of my grief. When my voice was finally hoarse from weeping, he simply said, "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just a high school crush. This was real. This was a forever kind of love. The shift after that was so gradual, so subliminal, that I can't pinpoint the exact moment it happened. It was in the lingering glances that lasted a second too long. It was in the way my stomach would do a little flip when he'd call my name down the hallway. It was in the air between us, which started to crackle with a new kind of energy, a tension that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The "I love you" was said 1,000 times in unspoken ways before it ever passed our lips. I remember one evening, on the rooftop of an old, abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It was our spot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. After a long silence, he turned to me and said, "You know, sometimes I feel like my head is so full of noise. All the expectations, all the pressure. It's just loud. But when I'm with you, it all just goes quiet." He looked at me, his eyes serious and searching. "You're the only thing that feels real sometimes." My heart was hammering in my chest. I could barely breathe. I know exactly what you mean, I managed to say. I was just thinking that you're the only person I never have to pretend with. I can just be me. And there it was, that moment. The world seemed to slow down, the ambient sounds of the town fading into a distant hum. It was just us, suspended in that perfect, terrifying space between friendship and something more. He gently reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and leaned in to kiss me. It wasn't a Hollywood kiss. It was hesitant and soft and a little clumsy, but it was filled with all the pent-up emotion of a year of friendship, of shared secrets and silent understanding. It was perfect. And just like that, we crossed the line. We were still Mia and Ethan, best friends. But now we were also us, a universe of two. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind romance, a fiery explosion. It was a slow burn, a quiet, steady flame that grew warmer and brighter with each passing day. He was woven into the fabric of my being. He became my biggest cheerleader, the fiercest defender of my dreams. He read every terrible first draft of every short story I wrote and told me I was a genius. He believed in my writing with a conviction that I could never quite muster for myself. He'd say, "One day, Mia, I'm going to be designing a library and your books will be in the front display." And I, in turn, would spend hours with him, looking at blueprints and architectural magazines, trying to understand his passion. His dreams became my dreams. Our futures felt inextricably linked, two vines growing toward the same sun. Or, so I believed, but forever is a long time. And the real world, with its sharp edges and practical demands, has a way of chipping away at teenage promises. As graduation loomed, the what-ifs we had so carefully avoided started to whisper in the quiet moments. And those whispers slowly grew into a deafening roar. I remember a tense dinner at my house. My father, a no-nonsense practical man, cleared his throat. "So, Ethan," he'd said, "your mother was telling Karen you got accepted into that school in Florence. That's quite a long way from home." My mother, her face a mask of worry, jumped in. "But Italy, it's so foreign and expensive. Mia's got that wonderful scholarship to the state university, you know. It's only an hour away. You two could still see each other all the time." I could feel the walls of the room closing in. They meant well, my parents. Their love was a fortress, built to protect me from the uncertainties of the world. But in that moment, their fortress felt like a cage. And I felt like they were trying to lock Ethan in it with me. Ethan tried to explain politely that it was his lifelong dream, that to be a great architect, he needed to see the great architecture of the world. He looked at me, a plea in his eyes, hoping for support. But I just stared at my plate, a traitorous silence, my only response. My family was a family of roots. They were deeply embedded in the soil of our small town. Their definition of a successful life was a stable job, a house with a picket fence, and family Sunday dinners. Ethan's family was a family of wings. They had always encouraged him to fly, to chase opportunities wherever they might lead. And I was standing right in the middle, feeling the pull of both, being torn in two. I was starting to feel less like his girlfriend, and more like his anchor. Later that night, sitting in his car overlooking the town, the rain streaking down the windshield, I gave voice to my fear. "Maybe they have a point," I whispered. "It would be a lot easier if you stayed." The hurt and disbelief on his face was a physical blow. "Easier?" he asked, his voice strained. "Mia, since when has our love been about what's easy? This is my entire future we're talking about." Our future, I thought. I never once pictured you asking me to give that up. Tears streamed down my face. "I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm not. I'm scared." He took my hand, his voice softening. "Hey, we can get through anything. We're Mia and Ethan, remember?" He said the words, and I let him hold my hand. But for the first time, the words felt hollow. The promise felt fragile. Because a new, terrifying thought had begun to take root in my mind. What if he stayed? What if, 20 years from now, he looked at me and saw not the love of his life, but the graveyard of his dreams? That thought, that single terrifying thought, would become my obsession. The next few months were a slow, quiet torture. On the surface, everything was the same. We went to prom, we held hands, we talked about the future. But it was a performance, a lie. Underneath, I was drowning. I watched him fill out his visa paperwork, his face alight with an excitement that felt like a personal betrayal. With every brochure he showed me of Florentine apartments, a piece of my own heart cracked and fell away. Because I was beginning to see a truth he was blind to. Our paths were diverging, and to love him meant I had to let him go down his alone. He was brilliant. It wasn't just a girlfriend's biased opinion, it was a fact. He had a gift, a way of seeing the world in lines and shapes and possibilities that was breathtaking. And that gift deserved to be nurtured in the cradle of civilization, not left to stagnate in our sleepy little town. And me? My dreams were here. My stories were rooted in the people, the places, the quiet dramas of the life I knew. I didn't want to be an expat's girlfriend, a footnote in his grand adventure. I wanted to be the author of my own story. And I was slowly, painfully realizing that our stories could not be written in the same book. And that's when the final, devastating piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Love isn't about possession. It isn't about shackling someone to your side so you don't have to be lonely. True love, the purest form of it, is about wanting what's best for the other person, even if it shatters your own world. If he stayed for me, he would grow to resent me. It wouldn't happen overnight. It would be a slow poison, a creeping shadow of what if that would eventually consume the beautiful thing we had. I could not, would not, be the reason for his lifelong regret. I loved him too much to become his cage. So, I made a plan. A cruel, calculated, necessary plan. I was going to perform the ultimate act of love. I was going to break his heart, and in doing so, break my own so completely that it could never be fully pieced back together. I chose our spot, the rooftop, the place where we had our first kiss, the place where we felt like we were the only two people in the world. I thought it would be poetic. In reality, it was just cruel. Using the memory of our greatest joy as the backdrop for our greatest pain. He found me there, his face etched with worry. "Mia, what's going on? You've been so quiet the last few days. You're scaring me. Talk to me." I turned to him, my face a mask of cold indifference that I had practiced for hours. My voice was steady, rehearsed, devoid of emotion. "Ethan, I don't think this is working anymore." The confusion on his face gave way to raw, wounded disbelief. He stammered, his voice cracking. "What? What are you talking about? Not working? We're Mia and Ethan. We work. That's the one thing in the world I'm sure of." I shook my head. "No, we're not. We were kids playing house. It's not real. We want different things from life. I have a plan, Ethan. A life here. College, then a job at the local paper maybe, a house, a family. It's a small life, but it's the life I want." I looked him up and down. "You want the world. You want to be some famous architect. Our futures just don't align." Every single word was a lie, a poisoned dart dipped in the venom of a fabricated truth. I had to make him believe it was my choice, my selfishness. I had to make him hate me a little because if he thought for 1 second I was doing this for him, his sense of honor, his love for me, would have forced him to stay. He would have thrown away his dream to fix my feigned heartbreak. And that was the one outcome I could not live with. He took a step towards me, his eyes pleading. "Align? Who cares if they don't align perfectly? We'll make them align. We can do long distance. Please, Mia, whatever is wrong, we can fix it. Just don't throw us away." I took a step back, pulling away from his touch. "There's nothing to fix," I said, my voice sharp and final. "I'm sorry, Ethan, if I led you on. But I've made my decision. It's over." I turned and walked away, not running, but forcing one foot in front of the other. Every step was a torment. I didn't look back, but I could feel his world collapsing behind me. Walking away from him that day was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was a physical act of self-mutilation. I was tearing my own soul in two and leaving the better half behind on that rooftop. My body was on autopilot, but my spirit, my heart, everything that made me me, was still up there with him, weeping in the rain. The years that followed are a bit of a blur in my memory, a gray fog of existence. I did what I said I would do. I went to college, I got my degree, I even got a job as a feature writer for the local newspaper. I built a life for myself brick by boring brick. But it was a house with no warmth, no light. It was just a structure. Because there was always a void, a gaping, Ethan-shaped hole in the center of my life that nothing and no one could ever hope to fill. I tried to date once, a kind man from work. But when he held my hand, it felt wrong. The geography of his palm was foreign territory. It wasn't Ethan. I ended it quickly, knowing it was unfair to him to love a ghost. Of course, I kept tabs on him. It was a form of self-flagellation, I suppose. A way to remind myself why I had done it. In the age of social media, it was painfully easy. I'd scroll through the posts of mutual friends, my heart pounding in my chest every time I saw his name tagged. I watched, from thousands of miles and a world away, as he began to live the life he was always meant to. The life I had gifted him. I saw photos of him grinning in front of the Colosseum. I saw his first approved architectural designs. I saw him celebrating with new, sophisticated friends in Florence. I remember one night, unable to sleep, I saw he had won a prestigious award for a small, conceptual design of a community library. It was beautiful, all clean lines and natural light, with quiet reading nooks and a small garden courtyard. It was the exact kind of place I used to describe to him, the perfect place to write a novel. For a wild, foolish moment, I thought, he remembers. But I quickly crushed the thought. It was a coincidence. It had to be. And every photo was a fresh twist of the knife in my gut. And, paradoxically, a wave of profound relief. He was okay. He had survived my betrayal. More than that, he was thriving. He was becoming the man I always knew he could be. He was happy. And his happiness was my only solace. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, I saw it. A photo of him and Chloe. The radiant woman from the wedding silhouetted on a beach at sunset. The caption read, "1,000,000 times, yes." He was getting married. And a strange, unexpected sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't happiness, not even close. But it was finality. The end of the story. The final, irrefutable proof that my sacrifice had not been in vain. It had all led to this, to him finding his forever. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I had to be there, not for him. I had to be there for me. I needed to see his happiness with my own eyes. I needed to witness the final page of the book I had started writing all those years ago on that rooftop. I needed that closure, no matter how much it hurt. So, here I am. The ghost at the happily ever after. In my purse, I have a letter. It's a letter I've written 1,000 times in my head over the last decade. It's the truth. It wasn't a desperate plea to take me back. It wasn't a rambling confession of my undying love. It was just the truth. A simple, straightforward explanation for an act that must have seemed like inexplicable cruelty to him. He deserved to know that our love wasn't a teenage whim that I had callously discarded. He deserved to know that he wasn't let go because he wasn't enough. He was let go because he was everything. And I loved him enough to want him to have the world, even if it meant I couldn't have him. I walked to the edge of the reception and discreetly slipped the envelope onto the gift table. My mission was accomplished. I turned to leave, but allowed myself one last look. I saw him across the lawn, standing with his new wife. He threw his head back and laughed, a pure, uninhibited, joyful sound that I knew better than my own heartbeat. And in that moment, watching him, the last vestiges of my own selfishness washed away. The aching sadness was still there, a dull throb in the background. But it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of pride and a profound, quiet peace. My love for him had been strong enough to build him a beautiful future. I had laid the foundation myself, with the rubble of my own broken heart. I'll never know what he felt in that moment when he read my letter. Relief? Anger that I had made that choice for him? Forgiveness? Maybe it was a chaotic storm of all three. My letter wasn't intended to absolve me or to disrupt his happiness. It was simply a final gift, the gift of truth, the final piece of the puzzle of our shared past, a piece he deserved to have. I imagine him looking up from the page, his eyes scanning the darkness at the edge of the park, as if he could will me to be there. I see him looking utterly lost for a moment, a man caught between two timelines, before his wife, Chloe, would come and gently place her hand on his shoulder. I see the storm in his eyes, calming as he looks at her, a small, sad, but reassuring smile on his face. He would carefully fold the letter, I think, and slip it into the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart, before taking her hand and walking back to their new life. I walked away from the park, down a quiet, empty street. I did not look back. The tears were gone. There was just an unmistakable aura of peace and acceptance. Some people might hear this story and say I was a fool, that I should have fought for him, that real love conquers all. But I don't believe that's true. I believe real love, the truest love, is about sacrifice. It's about wanting the best for someone so badly, you're willing to remove yourself from the equation to make it happen. Ethan was my first love. In many ways, he will always be my greatest love. But my love for him wasn't a cage, it was a pair of wings. And I set him free. And watching him fly, even from a distance, even with a broken heart, that will always be enough for me. Thanks for listening.